Hello, this is State Senator Michael Rodrigues, and welcome to the August edition of Voices from the Hill. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Representative Carol Fiola, Representative Alan Sylvia. And it is now in the middle of the summer, August, the dog days of August. Our formal legislative sessions are over, and we now just meet twice a week in informal sessions, so things are a little bit lighter on Beacon Hill. But there's always plenty to keep us busy here in the district. So, hello everyone. It's great to see you.
Nice
Hello,
to be
Senator.
here.
Yeah.
How are you?
Great. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what do we mean by formal session and sessions over. We've heard that session's over, and
Tell us,
Yep.
Senator, because
Yeah,
you've
okay.
been around the longest.
And
Well-
for me, it's been fascinating because as the newest rep coming on, I've been on board 10 months now, and I came in the middle of a session. And we say that all the time to people. I say, I came in the middle of a session. I took over for, of course, David Sullivan halfway through. So we thought that'd be a good conversation.
Absolutely, a little civics lesson. So in the Massachusetts legislature, we have a 2-year session. We are sworn in on the first Wednesday in January of election year. So next January, don't know what the date is, but on the first Wednesday, we'll get sworn in, and that's the beginning of a 2-year session. Formal sessions are sessions in which anything controversial is going to happen anywhere where there's going to be a roll call vote, where it's not by unanimous consent. Those run for 19 months straight until July 31st of an election year. That reform was put in back in 1994 to prevent a lame duck session of the legislature, so that post-election, because we have all of us are on the ballot and need to be re-elected this current year in order to continue to serve, legislatures would come back into formal sessions post-election. Those are called lame duck sessions because
So November to the end of December there?
November to the end of December, and things can happen that some of the electorate doesn't like. So in the name of reform, we are through with formal sessions on July 31st of an election year. That doesn't mean things don't happen. We still meet twice a week in informal session. As a matter of fact, I can remember back in 2000, I actually passed the Michaels Fund bill in informal session, and which was much to the surprise of folks, because being a mandated benefit, you know how difficult it is, insurance companies, you're fighting the big bad insurance lobby to get legislation like that done, but we did it in an informal
And that
session.
was my first time working with you, really, and
Right.
getting a taste of what happens in the legislature, because I was not an elected official at the time, but I worked closely with our friends at Michael's Fund and you to get that passed.
And
it
there's
was
some
well
important
done.
things that happen, even though it's not a formal session where there's an actual vote required, but unanimous consent, some major things happen. We were just talking about one with a situation with the prescription medication.
Right.
There's another one that's a possibility. We spoke about it briefly when Chairman O'Day came down from Elder Affairs with senior safety zones, like we have in school zones, where children, where motorists have to reduce their speed around school zones. We have a bill proposed so that motorists will have to reduce their speed around facilities where seniors live, and that's very important for people in Fall River, because we have a number of elder facilities, Mitchell, and they're all over. They're all over our community. I was at one last night, Olivera. Those people are sometimes in fear to cross the street. They have walkers in there. They have disabilities. Vehicles are coming by 60 miles an hour. So there's some good legislation that can be passed. But even though we're not in formal session, we have committee meetings that are going on, and those committee meetings get very intense. A lot of important things. But it's good to, and I'm glad you brought it up, that you wanted to talk about that, because it's good to have people are not aware of some of the things we do, and it's a mystery.
And how it works. And frankly, until you're in a job, do you really understand it fully in terms of the process, like anything. But one of the things that I think is interesting that I found in my 10 months is, you've heard us say we're on committees. Of course, Rep. Sylvia is on Elderly Affairs, among others. I know that the senator is on Revenue and Shares Revenue. I'm involved, we're all in at least 3 committees. I'm on Mental Health and Substance Abuse, Public Service, and Economic Development and Emerging Technologies. And I bring that up because we're on these committees, and when someone puts forth a bill, a legislator puts forth a bill, files a bill on behalf of a constituent or on an idea that they came up with, it gets assigned to one of the many committees. And so there are thousands of bills at any one time, and they're all in the committees. And just imagine, like anything else, one of those bills gets out there, and the committees meet and have public hearings, either in Boston and many and most times throughout the Commonwealth and in the districts, to get the input from you, from the constituents. Once that input has been percolating, and not only from the voting constituents, but we hear from business groups, we hear from concerned organizations regarding those particular bills. And when enough information is percolated and digested, oftentimes some of those bills will be combined together. And you've heard us, we maybe mention that there's an economic development bill. It'll be the combination of many of those ideas, those bills that have been filed, and they've been fine-tuned and adjusted.
And sometimes they go nowhere.
And I was going to say that. If they get, but you're right, Representative, because if a bill sees the light of day and actually gets passed, you need to know that is a result of an enormous amount of effort and energy.
The senator knows. You file what's important to you or a constituent. A constituent may come to us and say, "Look, I really think you should file a bill on behalf of a certain group of people or a certain issue," and you do that. And we sit with House Counsel. Those House Counsel is a group of attorneys that are available to both the Senate and the House of Representatives. They sit with us, and they've actually fashioned that legislation, that bill. So we tell them, these are the elements we want in this bill. They fashion it for us. They get back to us. We bring it to the clerk's office, the House clerk office. Senate brings it to the Senate clerk's office. They adopt that. It goes into laws. We approve it.
Which is a computer system that we can
into our
monitor.
computer system. It's sent to a particular committee. We don't even know what committee that's going to be sent into until it's reviewed by the House clerk. They decide, well, this really belongs in public safety, or this belongs in health finance, or in revenue. So, and now the bill's there. Now the bill has a hearing date. When the bill has a hearing date, it's very important.
If you're interested in this
If
bill,
you're interested in
or against it,
that you testify. And if I file a bill, I want to testify because I want to let those members on that committee know that this is an important bill to me, and I want to bring support for that. So I may ask other legislators to testify as well. So that's where you start getting support, and it becomes very interesting.
well, and you say that every day. You say this is the representative will, because Representative Sylvia and I work together, obviously, on the House side, and on the other side of the building, literally, is the Senate side. So we'll be meeting, and we say, this is so interesting. We learn in these hearings that come before us. It's fascinating. We had a hearing, I'll just bring this one up as an example, on non-compete clauses, okay? And what that means is when you start a job, you file the paperwork, typically the day before or when you accept the job offer, and all of a sudden there's one there that says you will not work for another company for X amount of time afterward, or you can't work in this industry, or you can't, there's a lot of different ones that might be filed. But what was interesting, when we had the hearing on these non-competes, the differing opinions. We had the heads of Google and the venture capital companies from around the Commonwealth. We had camp counselors saying how they had to sign, and today isn't for pros and cons of everything, because there's thousands of bills, we all have different opinions, but there were camp counselors that came in, next door to the head of Google, next door to another legislator. It's fascinating to hear the differing opinions and how these bills will affect you. So It's fascinating.
So sometimes you think it's not important. That's not important.
That's not a big
It's
deal.
important. Believe me, to someone, it's a priority in their life.
Yeah.
They'll stand with a sign all day in the
Yeah.
rain. They do. And so all of these issues are important issues. Maybe not to me, but to someone out there, to hundreds in some cases. Look, we talk about immigration. These are sensitive issues. Every one of the issues this year, it's been incredible. Because while we have been in session, every one of these issues have been intense, sensitive, emotional issues.
And it's
We
really
just had the gun.
the gun bill.
Gun bill. Very
Welfare reform.
intense. Welfare reform. Minimum wage. We could go on. The election reform, which was probably easier, but every one has been a battle. We just had the boundary issue with the women's
Reproduction clinics,
reproduction clinics, and a total public safety issue. But
Gets mis-
many people wanted to bring in other issues, which had nothing to do with what we were dealing with. And it was intense, and it was incredible debate. And Representative Fiola mentioned this, and Senator, we talk about it all the time. What an education to listen. I sit, and we heard Representative Fallon speak. He's leaving the House.
Right.
But some incredible oration, debate, incredible speeches from that. I gave my maiden speech a couple of weeks ago, and I was happy that's out of the way. And I'm happy, I was satisfied with it. Although
Well, what is a maiden speech?
Yes,
those
that's a
are-
good idea. Maiden speech is the first time that a state representative gets up to strongly advocate for, typically, or against, but typically for something that's before the House or the Senate. And it allows you to, and in that case, everyone is required to, while we're all respectful in the House chamber, sometimes there's little sidebar conversations, there's little, because we may know what they're going to speak about typically, or we may have already talked to that representative, but this is when all attention is on that representative.
every legislator is seated. Most legislative staff are in the chamber. The gallery is usually filled because it's usually an issue of great interest. And it was.
They all came to hear you, Al.
came-
Yeah, I'll tell you. You packed the house.
It was emotional.
Listen, you did a
It
nice
was
job, Rep.
emotional.
Sylvia, you
but
really did.
to do that and to do it on something that you're passionate about is really quite an experience. And you know, and you're on the batter's
Yeah,
box.
yeah.
When you get there and you look at your colleagues who you respect, and you know, in my closing remarks, I said I learned both from the Republicans and the Democrats, and I have. To look at all of those folks and to address them is an awesome experience.
Who got there the same way as us.
Yes.
And through your efforts of electing us. And what's also fascinating, I think, is, as we said, the number of bills, the fact that a bill actually turns into a law to get almost unanimous, or at least majority consensus. Typically, we have a pretty good majority, if not unanimity, unanimous support. It's been, to get to that point, the amount of work and energy and advocacy on both sides of an issue to end up with a bill that may at times look very different.
A lot of stress and pressure.
A lot different. And then it comes to our chamber, typically, in the House, and we vote on it in whatever fashion we've agreed to, as a House body, as a bipartisan body, typically. And then it goes over to the Senate, and they look at the bill. And why don't you talk about typically what happens, because
Well, it's the same process. The Senate goes through the same process as the House. Our Constitution, it's amazing. The more you serve and you realize how brilliant our founding fathers were in crafting the Massachusetts Constitution, which is the oldest constitution in the world, which was used as a basis for the United States Constitution. How there are a series of checks and balances, and how they wanted to ensure that no one body, no one branch, no one individual would have absolute power. And so the process goes through. it's a bicameral legislature. It has to be voted on a particular issue identically the same in both the House and the Senate. And both bodies are very different. Having served in both bodies, I can tell you that the process is very different internally. In the Senate, it's much smaller. There are only 40 senators. There are 36 from the majority party. So we meet in caucus prior to every formal session, all of us, and we go over all of the items that are on the calendar for that day. And it's an opportunity for us to educate and inform ourselves on the particular issues, and also provide us with the opportunity if we are looking to amend or change or modify the issues before us, we can begin to work on it right away so that we can be prepared when we go into session with amendments or further amendments.
And that's the caucus process, right?
That's
and
inside.
we have the same one on our side, but it is
Right.
the most fascinating
Right,
part.
right.
It is the most
Yep.
informative.
Right. And then we go into session and we actually debate. We tend to deliberate every single amendment. There are no bundlings or assemblings of amendments on the Senate side, so it takes a little longer. The voting process is a little different. When we vote in the Senate, it's actually an oral vote. The clerk would call your name, and you would have to shout out either yes or no. In the House, as you know, you have electronic voting, and you have to do that with 160 members. It'd take forever to go through the roll call. And then once the House and the Senate vote on a particular issue, if it's not exactly the same, because it has to be exactly the same, it goes into what's called a conference committee. And the conference committee is comprised of 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate that get together and try to compromise and work out a solution that the 6 of them can agree to. Once the 6 of them agree to it, they'll issue a conference report. It goes to the full body for confirmation. And at that point of time, senators and reps, we either vote to accept the conference committee report or to reject the conference committee report.
No further
And there are some
commentary,
big
discussion.
issues in conference. This is the August show, but we're,
should be done
you know,
by
it's July 24th that we're taping this show. And so right now in conference committee, we have the gun bill, we have the economic development bond bill, we have the environmental bond bill, we still have the substance abuse
And we have a
bill.
whole week coming up.
We have a whole week, so a lot of stuff's going to hit.
intense.
A lot of stuff's going to hit in this coming week. Big
We had-
issues.
And we had to meet today, this Friday, because all next week we will be,
Yeah.
we are asked to be there almost just about every
Every
day.
day.
Right.
And again, we don't know when we're going to get out of there.
And as chairman of a committee, I'm the Senate chair of the Joint Committee on Revenue. We're still getting bills filed. We actually had a hearing yesterday on 3 late file bills so that we have to dispose of. And it's a process. So we had the hearings, and we're going through the process on these late file bills. So activity is, but it's the diversity of the activity that's so much fun. You're talking environmental issues, you're talking public safety issues, you're talking guns, you're talking animals, you're
Cruelty.
talking
That's
And
one
we
of the
animal
get
cruelty.
emails we get emails from people who are very. When I mentioned intensity, we get emails from people who the dog issue, and this is more important than food. So people have their issue is more important than anyone else's issue. So we're getting this constant flow, but it's
Hundreds
it's
a day, hundreds a day.
It's so interesting that we mentioned the caucus, but people, and the caucus is a political gathering of our party prior to us going into formal session. The Senate does it, the House does it. Representative Fiola mentioned interesting to say the very least. It's to me it's not public.
It's closed door.
It's closed door, press isn't allowed. But what's so good about that, it allows all the legislators to be informal, to ask questions, because sometimes we're hit with a bill that's coming before us, we don't even know what it is. And I say, how could they do it? I go to Representative Fiola and say, I haven't even heard about this.
Yeah.
It's 10 o'clock in the morning, we're gonna vote on this afternoon? We haven't even heard about this thing. So that's why we end up in the room for 2 hours to iron this out, because we're asking questions. When did this come up? What's this all about? Who is this going to affect? What about my constituents?
You know, it's the process is intense, and Representative Fiola did not have the luxury of going through the Academy for Freshman Legislators. We organized the leadership in both the House and Senate, organize in December, after the elections in November, for newly elected legislators, a 3-day academy up at UMass Amherst.
Like a boot camp.
Like a boot camp. And I had the honor of actually organizing for a number of years, and I probably will again this year, but serving on that, where you can, because remember, you're newly elected, you don't even know where the bathroom is. You don't know how to, you know.
I did, of course, because of my 10 years in that building.
So you knew where the ladies' room was.
I didn't know where I was when I got there.
Yeah.
Luckily, and you know what a help it was. Like I said, it would be helpful.
Even the building itself, how you can't get to the first, you have to go up and
Take
over.
the elevator to go down to get to another floor.
I had that under my belt. So that, thank God, because I didn't go to this boot camp.
But how do you speak? How do you address one another? For instance, rules. We do not address each other by name when we engage in debate. It's never Representative Sylvia, I'm debating, it's the gentleman from Fall River or the gentle lady from Fall River, because it's not personal. And it really isn't. No. And what's amazing is that many of us have served, before we served in the state legislature, served in some way, shape, or form on a local board. In my case, it was the local finance committee. Representative Schmid was finance committee and selectmen. And it's much more personal on a local level. And politics locally can get very personal, where we are completely professional.
And it's great. It's great in a sense that they've been doing it this way in the House and in the Senate for 200 years in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And that's what is so good about it, and so interesting to sit there and to hear that even though there's some, they're completely opposite, and the debate will be debating one against the other, it's not personal. The respect for each other. So what the senator just said when they refer to the gentle lady from Fall River, the gentleman from, I disagree with the gentleman from Fall River. It's that respect. You cannot be in the chamber without a suit on, a jacket. Women have to be dressed professionally. We can't speak on cell phones in the chamber during session.
Once we're on roll call, we can't get out.
We can't leave. They lock our doors.
They lock our doors.
Court officers lock our doors. We can't use our cameras.
Although we did sneak a picture.
Once in a while, but if they see you, the court officer will make you take it down. So there are a lot of rules that we have that are very interesting, that have been in place. Of course, they didn't have cameras, cell phones back 200 years ago, but some of those rules go way back.
Well, I've been around for a while now. I remember when you could smoke in the State House.
We have little ashtrays on our desk.
It amazed me when I was first elected, and I'd walk into that building, and I'd see people smoking, walking down the hallway, smoking cigarettes in this beautiful, you know how beautiful it's. If you haven't been to the State House, really come up. We'll all be happy to give you a tour, and the history and the beauty. It's your building. This is your building, but to see people smoking in there, it's like, oh my God, putting their cigarettes out on the marble floors. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Those are now water bottle holders. The little on our desks in the house have a little box here. Our names are there, and then it has a green and a red and a neutral button. And so when it's time to vote, they'll say roll call. They'll announce it through the building. If someone may be away at the restroom or up in their office for a minute, we've got to come down, and we only have 3 or 4 minutes to do so, and we push. But on that desk is also a little brass holder, and it was an ashtray. Now it's a water bottle. It's perfect size for your water bottle if you're going to be there all
prior
afternoon.
to it being an ashtray, it was an inkwell.
Before
Because
that, it was
those
an inkwell,
desks
that's
go
right.
back to the 1800s. And so the hole was there. It's a round inkwell hole, and then it was an ashtray.
Yeah, those are the original desks from when the House moved to that part of the building in 1895.
There's so much history in that room when you sit there and are involved in that process.
But let's go back to process a little bit, because it's one of my favorite historical quotes is by Winston Churchill, who said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Yeah. And it's not efficient. When you have a form of government where everyone has the ability and is entitled to express their opinion, even the minority, the majority wins, but the majority has to respect the minority. And it's our responsibility as elected officials to listen to every opinion and to really consider every opinion and try to accommodate everyone. And we spend a lot of time doing that. The majority trying to accommodate the minority and respecting the opinion of the minority and putting together a bill, oftentimes that there's components that someone doesn't like. It's never perfect. I've never seen a perfect piece of legislation.
That's for sure.
And it happens all the time. And that's the challenge often. There's another saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Is that, do the best you can, as long as you're making progress and you're improving the situation, then let's move it.
And you have to say, and if you just look at what we've done in this session, quality legislation. If you look at election reform, best, I say, if you look at what's going on in the rest of the nation, I read what's going on in Georgia, what's going on in South Carolina. We have the best. We have the best election laws. Will kick in 2016, where there'll be early voting. I think that's amazing. So we have
early registration,
early voter registration. But election reform, minimum wage, highest minimum wage in the country.
And let me just say this about the minimum wage, how important that was for families here in our Commonwealth. But you know what? How that happened, I think we all need to tip our hats, because if it wasn't for passionate advocates, that bring the message consistently to the forefront, some of these things wouldn't happen.
And some people didn't like it. Some people still
not
don't.
everybody. Business weighed in as well. We were able to freeze unemployment insurance and then allow for a number of years on that to help business. Again, there's always somebody that feels like they might have won or might have lost. And even with minimum wage, the point is to be a strong advocate.
But we did something. See, the part that that I'm so upset about what's going on in our federal government, because our federal government's doing nothing.
Yeah, we do something, and we have debate, and it's
we
not
move it forward.
But we're getting something done, and it's very, very frustrating that nothing is happening in Washington
and that
at all.
collegiality is so important, that is missing on the federal side. You mentioned it earlier. When that debate goes on, or we know the minority party or some of the minority party are absolutely speaking against something that we feel, or I feel strongly about, the debate is done, the vote is taken, and we're sitting talking.
Right.
We're talking to our comrades on the other side of the aisle, be it Republican or Democrat, and in that collegiality. And that's important. We don't make it personal. And like you said, on the local side, you see a lot of that. We've been hearing a lot of that. But that is the beauty of what we do.
You see looking, you see more viciousness.
Yeah, it's more personal.
And when you see it, I hate to say it in some ways, but when you look at what happens in a city, and look at Fall River, for
Well,
example.
we can go on all day about this, or maybe we'll pick it up next time, but I wish everyone a great summer. Enjoy this weather.
Enjoy the outside.
Thank you. Please vote. Please register to vote. It's important.
Yes. Thank you. Very good. Until next time.